Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
current City Hall reporter Dylan McGinnis.
Also current City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter.
Investigative reporter Brian Chasnoff.
Yeah, we got the kind of a logjam there as far as the our City Hall reporters, but it's all going to get sorted out. Dylan, how much longer are you going to be doing it?
This is my second to last week, so I guess This is my
Wow.
second to last show as well. I know. It's kind of sad.
Going to Houston?
Houston.
Well, we're going to miss you. Yeah.
Dang, Houston.
Yeah, I know. Why is it always Houston? No, we're going to miss you, but we'll talk about that when we get closer. We will send you off to Houston in fitting style. Yeah. I want to mention to our listeners that we won't have a podcast next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. I think that's August 13th.
Oh, so this is my last show then.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, wow.
That's right. So this is going to be the week.
Violin.
This is actually going to be our fitting send-off. Is there anything that we should say?
I think you should just go crazy on this show.
Okay.
Just
Just let loose.
say how you really feel.
Burn all the bridges.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
But in song.
In song, yes.
I will let you kick things off on your last podcast with us. We've talked a lot about paid sick leave. Last Wednesday, after we did the last podcast, we found out what the situation is going to be. The court made a determination about it.
Yeah, that's right. So the judge signed off on the deal, basically, that the city attorney's office and the businesses challenging the law agreed to delay the ordinance. So San Antonio's paid sick leave ordinance will now be delayed. It was supposed to take effect August 1st. Now it's December 1st. But there are all kinds of kind of interesting political implications that we can get into in a little bit.
And before we do that, I want to introduce our special guest. We're so glad to have Juany Torres join us, daughter of the South Side, Stanford graduate, Hillary Clinton's deputy digital director for the state of Nevada in 2016, founder of Organize SA. I have to read these because there's so many things to mention, and I'll forget something if I don't. You were deputy campaign manager for Ron Nirenberg in 2017, and you served on his staff as director of community engagement and LGBTQ liaison. And you were the campaign manager for what was, I think, most commonly seen as one of the biggest upsets in the state of Texas, the election of Lina Hidalgo as Harris County judge. Juany Torres, thank you so much for joining us. And what have you been up to? We talked a lot around election time last year, and after that big win in Harris County. What have you been up to the last few months?
Yeah, so after the midterms, took a little break in December, celebrate the holidays. And then this year, I was actually selected as one of 20 fellows in a national fellowship through the Blue Leadership Collaborative. So this fellowship, over 500 people applied. They selected 20 folks across the country who have managed campaigns before, and they want to set us up for success in managing congressional campaigns this upcoming cycle, competitive congressional campaigns this upcoming cycle. So it's been a great experience.
I know it's hard to summarize, what you take away from something like that. Or anything that stands out to you as far as something that you learned that will help you in the next campaign?
It's wonderful to feel like Texas is finally on the radar of so many folks as somewhere that we need to invest in, like actually heavily invest in, especially by the DCCC. I'm really excited. I met a lot of different campaign managers from last cycle. Mm-hmm. And it was particularly important for us to stress how the Latino vote and the Black vote will matter no matter where you are, no matter how rural your county your congressional district might be. Looking at how minority voters turned out in 2018 and what we can learn for 2020. And also how important the top of the ticket can be, but more than that, the coalition building that happens on the ground between community organizers and folks that are already doing the work, and then campaign managers that might be coming from different parts of the country or different organizations like the DCCC, how important it is for us to look at what's already happening, lay out the foundation, and build up on it instead of coming into a district and thinking that we can just redo the model however we want.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about coalition building, all that kind of stuff, I mean, this sounds like these have been the struggles for the Democratic Party in Texas for a long time. I think it seems like there's more of an awareness and an understanding about how to do it now. But I mean, that I think was the problem for a long time, wasn't it?
Possibly, it can be seen as such. I think, for example, with the mayor's race here that I ran, or Lina Hidalgo's race, coalition building was key for us to win these upsets. Because if it wasn't for the relationship building and the organizational infrastructure of other partners like TOP or different on the ground folks, we would not have had the capacity as underdogs to win. So, I think there's a lot to learn by the DNC, the DCCC, and this fellowship kind of gave us that opportunity.
What do you make of this situation with paid sick leave? It got pushed back 4 months. You had a commitment by the city council to implement this August 1st of 2019, which would have been this week. The mayor has said he wanted it to go into effect this week, but didn't seem to really take any action to do anything about it. And what do you think about that decision to push it back, and how do you think the council and the mayor have handled it?
It's been very disheartening. I was there on Monday for the delay or the initial hearing of it.
The delay of the delay.
The delay of the delay. Yes, it was interesting. It's disheartening because I feel like in a city like San Antonio, right, my hometown, the hometown of some of us here, it is a working class city. It is a city that often has a lot of voter apathy or not huge civic engagement numbers during municipal elections. And this was an issue where over 144,000 San Antonians organized petition and wanted this to happen. And yet our elected leaders turned their back on that population. And so it's very difficult for me as someone that focuses her work on building capacity, increasing organizing, bringing up marginalized communities in a city that, says we're going to be looking at equity as a priority, to then see the result and think those with power, those that were elected, didn't do everything they could have to actually push forward on it. And with that, I understand. I'm sympathetic to business concerns. And I do think there has been many opportunities for folks to come together and try to maybe change or develop new practices within the ordinance. But that was not sufficient for us not to live up to the commitment that we had to San Antonians of the August 1st implementation.
I want to ask you, Juany, so one of the things, me and Gilbert both wrote about this over the weekend, but I guess it's just striking to me from a political sense that a policy, like you said, that had 144,000 San Antonians sign a petition for it. That's, 10% of the city's population. It's more people, I believe, than voted in the mayoral election, right? Why is such a seemingly popular policy, why does it have no standard bearer on a city council? Why is no one willing to take this torch and carry it, given the fact that it seems to be politically popular?
I would love to know the answer to that. But I do think that, at the end of the day, having worked with so many principals, so many candidates directly, it comes down to your value system and what you're willing to fight for, what you will be bold on, what you'll be audacious on, where you will, use your bully pulpit and your political capital to push on. And, there have been many articles. I've read a couple columns from Gilbert. There is a champion lacking on this issue, right? Rey Saldaña was that champion. So I hope that, we learn from it as a council, as a city, and folks start it's a huge opportunity, right? I think y'all have also talked about how there's so many council members looking at the mayor's seat for 2021. And so if that's the case, as the political strategist, I would have said, run on this, right?
Yeah.
Take it up. There's a gap, obviously. There's silence. Use it because people want this, and it matters. So I don't know the answer as to why folks haven't. I would say there are other interests perhaps, or their calculus and those around them, their circle of influence might be telling them it's not an issue worth fighting for. But I'm one that has been successful in managing the races of underdogs because I listen to the people, because I am a working class resident of San Antonio with working class family, family. And I believe that people will decide more and more what the future will be. And this is a clear example of us understanding that those in office might not be in partnership with working class families.
And one thought is that, that some of the members of the council and maybe the mayor, question the constitutionality themselves. But my thought is on this, that, if you're going to face legal action on this, which is probably inevitable, because even if we delay this 4 months, I don't know that the business community is going to be satisfied by any compromise. If you're going to face, legal action on it, just do it now. commit to it, and if you voted for it, and then let things play out, the way they're going to do it. I wanted to mention too that we talk a lot about the politics of this, but to bring it back to the human factor, the Institute for Women's Research released a study last year finding that 354,000 San Antonio workers were without paid sick leave, which is like 39% of the San Antonio workforce. So there are real human consequences for this. 4 months means to politicians that say, well, we're just pushing this back a little bit. There are real consequences.
And that's why I think there's a disconnect, right, between those that have that elected office and the people living it day to day. I would also say, there's often after municipal elections, if you're on social media, you'll see your newsfeed full of folks kind of wagging their finger and saying, San Antonians, we have to do better. Like, gente, why didn't you vote at higher numbers? This is a clear example why there's a lack of trust in municipal government. And there's little optimism or belief that when you vote, it will have an impact. Because this was about living up to a commitment. It wasn't about committing to an ordinance. They did. When they passed it, they did. And so this council needed to stand by that decision. And they didn't, right? And you talked about social media tweets and how that was pretty weak compared to what could have happened. I agree, right? I agree. And I hope that folks muster the courage to really stand by the conviction of the people of San Antonio.
As an alum of the mayor's office, were you surprised he didn't do more to kind of change course here? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Was I surprised? No.
Well, we're going to shift.
Brian's eyes light up.
Did you want to elaborate on that? Or?
Well, if you don't mind, why weren't you surprised? Were there other examples of this sort of outcome that you can point to from when you were with him?
No. I mean, he has said publicly that he doesn't believe it's something the city should be acting on. Like, they passed it as a city council, and therefore he was going to commit to that, right? But he wasn't the champion in council on this issue, and therefore I wasn't surprised that he decided, to show his support publicly, and then this was still the result. Because you do, I think, especially with issues like, this hot potato, I think someone called it, you need you need someone that is going to just run with it and say, this is right, punto, right? And we don't have that right now in the council. So, no, I wasn't surprised.
What were his main objections that you can point to?
That's the one I heard from him himself, right? He said that he just didn't believe that it was a city issue, that it should be the state that decides.
All right.
Yeah. And I guess he did talk about that when they passed it last year, that, the state should really, so we don't have different cities, having different
Yeah, he's always been clear on that. And it's again, kind of, a lot of the issues around paid sick leave here kind of point back to the kind of weird circumstances under which it was passed, right, with the referendum and then city council adopting it instead of sending it to the ballot. But after the legislature didn't kill these policies, which it was expected to do, Ron said, I'm going to stand by the will of the people at this point. And I guess people were just disappointed that standing by didn't necessarily mean also, mustering a council majority to change course in the city attorney's office.
Well, I'm going to shift gears here from local government to national politics, because this week we have the next round of Democratic presidential debates, Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday night we have former El Paso Congressman Beto O'Rourke among a group of candidates that I think we've got Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg is on there, Elizabeth Warren, and then former Mayor Julian Castro will be on Wednesday night with Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, among others.
Which night is Andrew Yang on? Because I saw
I think it's Wednesday.
Because I think he's second to the right off stage. He's in a very prominent position whichever night he's on.
Yeah, Andrew Yang is. It's interesting.
So interesting.
He's actually doing better in the polls than some of the elected officials. But Juany, I mean, I know that you saw the first round of debates. I mean, there's kind of a sense like neither Julian nor Beto are doing great in the polls. I mean, generally maybe about 2%, 1%, depending on. But there's a sense that Julian that he has momentum. His fundraising has picked up since his good performance in the first debate. And so while he and Beto are probably in similar place in the polls, there's a sense of Beto's, that they're going in opposite directions. Beto's fundraising has diminished. His support has gone down, and I think there's less media following him around, from what I understand. What do you see as far as where these two Texas candidates stand at this point?
Yes, that's the observation that Julian is picking up steam. There's momentum. He was able to already qualify for the September debates, which is a huge hurdle for many candidates. And it is a way to kind of, the stakes are being raised so that, or the metrics to what you need to reach for you to be on the stage are being raised to kind of weed out folks. And he made it right after that first debate.
As far as like the fundraising part.
Yeah,
of
the fundraising. And there's one more poll he needs.
He should get that.
But
right?
yeah, I think one just came out this weekend that I believe has qualified him.
Okay. And just to clarify for the listeners, you reach a certain number of donors, which he's reached.
Individual donors.
Individual donors. But there's also a component where you have to be at least 2% in four polls that they look at.
That's
so Beto O'Rourke has reached
Donor threshold, right? Yeah.
Both, I think the threshold for both, and I guess Julian, that was the question for him. It was just the 2% issue, which he looks like he's going to make it.
Yeah, and so I just think there's more momentum on Julian's side because he is being bolder in how he is presented. He's ahead of many of the issues, right? I think especially with immigration, as we saw, Elizabeth Warren then followed his lead. A couple other candidates, Kamala, everybody's immigration plan came after his. Reparations, same. There are so many of these social issues that matter to Americans all over the map, but especially during this upcoming 2020 election with Donald Trump being the lead opponent. And Julian is being bold. He's being bold, and he's putting his values out there in full display. And I think there's a level of authenticity to his campaign that is not perceived on others.
Obviously, and again, this is a perception game, and you know how this works. Just the perception, regardless of what the polls say, the perception is, that Julian, I think, is exceeding expectations probably that a lot of people had. Maybe not necessarily people in San Antonio, but people who didn't know as much about him. And whereas Beto O'Rourke, the expectations were probably higher on a national level. And so there's a sense that, I don't think every article that's written about him, it's like what a disappointment his campaign has been. And Chris Cillizza was CNN in his pre-debate analysis said, I think he had looked at which candidates had the most to lose. And he had Beto O'Rourke second behind Joe Biden and basically said, this is it for him. He's got to do something. I know that you observed his campaign in 2018 when he ran for Senate and had so much success in almost beating Ted Cruz. What do you think has gone wrong? I know that everybody's kind of looking at him saying, well, what's gone wrong? But what is your sense about about that?
Running for office or a position in elected office is a job. And there will be applicants to this job that need to, meet certain expectations, certain qualifications that are better built for certain jobs and not others. I think Beto O'Rourke would have been a great U.S. senator. And when he ran his campaign, it was clear that he was exceeding the expectations of the job description, especially because he was running against Ted Cruz, right? So he was able to make it his own and shine, and people loved it. It was it was an innovative way of raising money, an innovative way of using social media, an innovative way of distributing organizing in Texas. It was great. And so he succeeded there. I think when you're running for president of the United States, especially when you have over 20 incredibly qualified candidates, you need to know what is it that I'm bringing to this job description that sets me apart from the other candidates, the other participants. And I don't know that there is something special about half of the folks running that really sets them apart for the general public. And, I think folks are saying maybe our expectations were really high because the role was a better fit for him. And this role is better fit for someone else. And these debates are showing that.
I guess I wonder just from a logistical standpoint, because the thing that in terms of the narrative, of Julian rising and Beto falling, I guess what I fall back on is kind of infrastructure in the sense that while Beto had a very lackluster performance in the first debate, he also has, we know he has the money and we know he has the kind of robust staff in Iowa and other places that if he is able to, get a spark again, he can quickly take advantage of it. And I guess I wonder on your perspective, just of behind the scenes campaigning, what your take is on that in the sense of, there's a narrative and there's workers on the ground working.
I mean, every campaign I've done, we've been scrappy. Even Hillary for Nevada. Nevada wasn't Florida or Ohio in regards to the resources coming from Brooklyn, and yet we made it work, right? Nevada was seen as the firewall for Hillary Clinton after having tied in Iowa and losing New Hampshire. Nevada was where she kind of picked it up again, and so I think, Beto does have many more resources than Julian. There are a lot of reasons for that. One, he had just ran, so he has a great, supporter list and email list where he can fundraise from, and he already was in the public eye, whereas Julian was HUD secretary, he had his PAC, and he kind of was behind the scenes for 2018. Though he did a lot of groundwork in building up other candidates, he wasn't in the media spotlight. So yes, there are advantages to Beto O'Rourke's campaign, but I think, at the end of the day, having the grit, the resiliency, and a campaign staff that is hardworking and scrappy will get you a lot further than so many different resources. That's based on my personal experience working for underdogs, right? When Ron ran against Ivy, we were not nearly the same on donations. The folks, he was an underdog. He was running against the incumbent, and we did not have the resources, and we made it work. Same thing with Lina Hidalgo. I mean, especially with Lina Hidalgo. Ed Emmett had millions of dollars in his bank. He'd been there for 11 years. Mm-hmm. Lina, I think we ended up raising around $600,000 for Harris County. And we made it work. And it goes back to my earlier point about coalition building and working with folks on the ground. And Julian has those relationships because he's always been there for other people.
One of the things that I sense, and I think this might be true of other candidates too, but I feel this more with him than most candidates. Like the great belief that his team has in him. Like it doesn't feel like this is our job to work for him to help him get. I mean, they believe in him with such passion, and that kind of goes to the point that you're making. That scrappiness when people are just like, we're going all the way for this person, and it makes such a difference.
Yeah, there's a level of commitment and level of support. I will also say, in watching kind of the field, something that has been disheartening for me that I don't think we're talking about enough in the media or in just our circles, with friends, is that there are reasons for the lack of funds that minority candidates like Julian and Andrew Yang are getting, and compared to white males that are running for president like Mayor Pete and Beto, right? There are a lot of biases. There are a lot of different reasons on why we think someone is more viable than someone else and who we're willing to put money in and not invest in. And that's a tell as old as time in any field. Who are you going to bet on? And often Latinos, Black, marginalized communities are not bet on. And so there is something to be said there that, like, when we're looking at prospects and when we're looking at resources and where these candidates stand, we need to check ourselves as to why that bias is there and what are we not seeing. Because that's the only way we're actually going to be able to measure how far folks get from where they started.
Yeah, that's, as you said, I mean, so much of this that I've noticed with the presidential campaigns over the years is, people will say, well, I like so-and-so, but I don't think that person can win. And I think Julian has had a real hurdle to overcome, and I think he's in the process of dealing with that with his debate performances and just his campaign appearances and all the policy positions he's put out. But just a lot of people saying, "Oh, I like him," or "Yeah, he seems like a good candidate," but he can't win. And so much of that happens.
The person that will win is the person we believe will win, right? And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think. But I will say that the more eyes that get on Julian and his platform, the more folks listen to him and actually get to learn about him, the more they like him. And I was really surprised. I helped his presidential launch at the Guadalupe. And folks were flying in from Iowa, Florida, North Carolina to volunteer. Like, they paid for their flight. They found their housing, and they were here because they were so excited because at some point in their life they had heard of this young mayor from San Antonio who then went on to be the keynote at the DNC, who then became HUD secretary, and they believed in his story and they believed in his his truth, and therefore they're investing in him. So the more we can help lift up and amplify him and his campaign platform, I think the more we will see there's return on that investment.
Do you think Julian has any attributes that really stand out in a good contrast to some of the front runners?
Yeah, so his temperament, I think, is key, right? So I'm still like, I was blown away by how he was able to conduct himself in that back and forth with Beto O'Rourke, where he took advantage of that opportunity, of that issue that he knew he had done all his homework in, that he had led on the immigration policy proposal, that he had all his ducks in a row, and used that exact time to speak up and say, this is my issue and this is our issue, this is what we want, and you're not paying attention. Unlike other candidates who were kind of like just trying to see time, any window of time, and just blab out things because they wanted to be able to. There were a lot of folks like that, right? The first and the second night, and they just kind of became background noise. Some of them became actually annoying, and he has a temperament that it's very precise. He's always been like, right? That, and strategic, disciplined. And I would say that I interned in his office. It was my first political internship in college, was coming back to San Antonio and being in his office. And I remember a big takeaway was the discipline in the office, but also the loyalty he was able to inspire from everyone working for him because of how smart he was as to when he would speak up and not, when he would direct his staff to do things and not, how he managed the council behind the scenes. There was a lot there that I thought prepared him for now taking on this stage and being equally measured in his approach.
You don't see, I mean, to that point, I mean, I can't think of a single person in his years as a council member, mayor, at HUD, anyone who's ever like worked with him and has come away from it and criticizing him, or who left under bad circumstances and said, I was really disillusioned with him. I mean, I've never heard anything like that.
No, he inspired confidence, and it shows, and he continues to.
Well, before we finish off, I wanted to talk a little bit about Wendy Davis. Last week we mentioned that I think last Monday, she officially announced she was going to be running for Congress, U.S. District 21, which includes parts of Austin, the Hill Country, like North San Antonio area. It's been a reliably Republican seat forever. Lamar Smith won by 15, 20 points every time. But Chip Roy, who won last November, had a very close race with Joseph Kopster, the Democrat. I think he won by 2.6%. And Chip Roy, he was a former chief of staff for Ted Cruz. He ghost wrote Rick Perry's book, Fed Up. He's a hardcore conservative that he's, a lot of people are fired up about on the Democratic side to try to flip that seat. Wendy Davis, obviously, was a former state senator from Fort Worth, ran for governor in 2014 and lost to Greg Abbott. Last week, she raised $250,000 in the first 24 hours after announcing. And Dylan, we were both at the San Antonio listening event. She's doing a series of listening events in the district. I mean, what was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I'm bummed to be leaving because I think it's going to be a really interesting case study in kind of congressional politics. And Juan, I'd love to get your take on this in a second. Because it seemed like, there's two different, very broadly speaking, there's two different approaches to Democratic congressional campaigns right now. One is kind of the 2018 midterm playbook of concentrate on healthcare, concentrate on, kitchen table issues, and that's what they kind of rode to a majority. The other is kind of, lean into progressive issues, activate these constituencies that are typically forgotten about. And it's interesting to see which one Wendy Davis can play, because I think she can play both, right? She's a kind of progressive champion from her, filibuster or gubernatorial campaign, but she's also, it seemed to me, my initial take from our time there last week was that she was taking the former strategy, the kind of midterm strategy of, gradual progress, focus on healthcare. She's not for Medicare for all.
That was interesting to me. Yeah, she wasn't real specific about healthcare. I mean, I think she talked about maybe eventually
Public
working
option.
towards maybe Medicare for all. But it felt to me like she was thinking about incremental steps to maybe strengthen the the Affordable Care Act, and which I think is probably. I mean, when Joseph Kopster ran. He was seen as kind of a moderate, business-friendly Democrat in that district. He kind of talked along the same lines, like, well, Medicare for all might be a good idea, but it's not going to happen. That's what I remember him saying about that. Juany, when you look at that district, it's a tough district for Democrats, but it's one of those districts. I mean, I think the DCCC looks at that maybe next to Will Hurd's District 23 as maybe the one in Texas that might have the best shot at flipping. And
I would say Shrees, Pete Olson, Shrees.
Pete Olson, because Pete Olson, in 22, just announced last week that he's
probably a
retiring.
high one, but I don't. I mean,
right.
Yeah. But it is important. I mean, Trump won that district by 9.9, 10 points in 2016, and then Copster only lost it by close to 3.
Right.
So, I mean, there is an opportunity for us to flip it. I don't see why she can't do both. I don't know why any candidate can't do, both the progressive issues champion and also the pragmatic know your audience type of approach. I would say, though, the most important thing that I hope any candidate, but definitely folks that are running against, ultra-conservative Republicans to take for this 2020 election is to stand by what they believe and be loud about what they believe. Like, be authentic to whatever it is true to you. Don't shy away from something that you could be a champion on, because political consultants are telling you that it's too scary for that district. More than saying, if she doesn't believe in Medicare for all, then I'm glad she cleared that up. But if she does, and it's being told to her that, no, this is not the way you win this district because it's more conservative, you're going to have problems later, I think, because you need to be able to run fully on what it is that is motivating you and what is motivating many Americans across the country. That district, it is very rural, but it also has San Marcos. It has a few college campuses. And so I think that's key for this district. I'm not sure, and I don't know how Copster's race was run because I was in Harris County, but I'm not sure how much he did to take advantage of college campuses. Or to kind of rally up young voters to run on that Beto wave and then amplify it for his district. I'm not sure. So I think Wendy has that opportunity, and she has inspired so many young voters already because of her time in the state legislature. So I think she has a great opportunity to capitalize on it and keep it going if she's true to what she believes.
One of the things that I hear talked about a lot is because obviously she's someone who comes in with name recognition, and because she ran for governor and she became kind of a national figure in 2013 before she ran for governor because of the famous filibuster that she did against a stringent anti-abortion bill that the Republicans were pushing. But what I sometimes hear from people is she's I'll say this. I generally hear this more from people on the right, who you kind of write off her candidacy right at the beginning, which is that she's well known, but that the association that people have is with that losing gubernatorial race, which I think she said at the time she felt like she was maybe stage managed a little bit too much, so she didn't feel like she was really true to herself, and she learned from that. Or that people associate her purely as a one-issue candidate with which is, I don't think is fair, because I know she was very involved in public education as a state senator and other issues. But when you look at that as someone who's managed campaigns, you have someone who people are going to know who they are, but they're, at least for some voters, there might be some baggage there, or some things that have to be clarified about that person. I mean, what do you see as the challenge there for her?
Yeah. Well, there are also so many new voters compared to 2014 when she ran, right? So
That's right.
There's a whole new pool of folks that need to become acquainted with her. I would say, as a campaign manager, you run on what the platform should be consistent no matter what. You can do some education on who you are and info stuff before the primary. But after that, it's all on the issues and where you stand in contrast to who you're running against. And so I would say, there are, there's baggage with any candidate that has ran in the past and had a high profile the way that Wendy did. There is a lot there that you need to kind of deconstruct, or maybe even use to your advantage to set up a stage. But you're no longer that candidate, and it's important for you to run as you are now without revisiting too much, because if not, you're not moving forward, and voters will also not move forward with you.
Do you think it's a liability for her that, she was, is new to the district, that she represented Fort Worth, I believe, right, in the state Senate? And I think there's this perception when politicians are new to a district that, they're just, there to run. Do you think that's a liability, or is that just something that pundits talk about.
No, I think it will be a liability if that's how folks want to twist it. But she's been there since, one, she worked in Austin for the state ledge.
Right.
And two, she's been there since
That's right.
after the gubernatorial election. So that's her life now. Like Austin, Texas is where she resides. And also, she's been very great. She's an ally to so many different organizations who she needs to build coalitions with for this district to work. And she's been doing the work. So she wasn't the type of candidate that lost and kind of went home, hibernated, and went on a road trip. Like, she actually was someone that went out there that, started to see how she could lift up other organizations. She had Deeds Not Words, which was based on building more political power, democratic political power in Texas. She has great relationships with Planned Parenthood, Joel, other orgs, right? So she's done the work. She's been behind the scenes. She's worked hard, and I think it's going to pay off.
Well, on that note, I think we're gonna leave things for this week. Juany Torres, thank you so much for joining us. It was great.
Thank you, guys.
And we will be back in 2 weeks. And take care.